Be that as it may, as I was slowly drifting into sleep, I thought about the mentioned address. Their house, their garden, maybe they also had a pool. In fact, I expected to visit an extraordinary place, as my destination was not only located in District 1, but also on the apparently infamous Wagner Avenue. Admittedly, I never heard that name, but the way my parents reacted to it told me that I kind of had a lack of knowledge in this aspect. All in all, I was very excited when I fell asleep, but also nervous, as it was my first time having contact with high society. Before that occurred though, I had to pass one further day of school. While sitting in class on the following morning, I therefore barely managed to concentrate on the topics and the according materials, as my mind was already floating in Wagner Ave. For everyone else, it was kind of a rut, being in class, doing the same dull stuff over and over again. I mean, I had to endure that too, only with the difference that I most likely diverged as regards extracurricular activities. For now though, I set myself the intention to not share it with others, not even with my closest friends. Momentarily, only the inevitable duties in terms of acquainting someone with my true deeds over the last few weeks needed to be fulfilled, even though I knew it would entail a scenario a la us against the world. The world with everyone in it could wait, as the organization related to Chloe and me took precedence. First, when that would be arranged, I intended on telling related parties that were as yet not directly involved. All in all, I therefore had to play pretend that it was a boring day filled with routine and learning afterwards, though within, my excitement almost boiled over. After I ultimately managed to maintain my poker face for the 6 lessons on that day, nothing held me there any further. I said goodbye to Ben and Patrick and hurried over to my car, from where I considered the next steps. The number 227 that gave me direct hint on the location of my destination on Wagner Avenue, yet told me something implicit. 227. So there were at least 226 more houses situated there, which meant that I only had to find the beginning for me to orientate toward the final address. But first I had to get there, namely by leaving the second area and then following the signs to the street inside the first one, which seemed not too difficult, as Wagner appeared to be one of the biggest streets there, and thus hard to miss. Although they didn't mark the zones directly, you could distinctly see the difference between 2 and 1. While one house had a broken fence and an old wooden door, the other put a pool and a driveway into the spotlight that was wider than the speedway itself. I evaluated it as funny that you could see the difference so clearly, but the other way around, comparing zone 2 and 3, it was just like that. Only that they were not juxtaposing the features of premises here, but the presence of entire houses instead. However, when I kept on driving, I got closer to the center of the area, where I truly found myself in another world. A world that had nothing to do with my way of life. One obvious difference was shown right when I investigated the streets. Street lamps as accurate as the soldiers of a military parade, the lines painted with a ruler, and last but not least, the vehicles driving on that very street. My oh my. Like a supercar would strike attention while driving through my native district, I did now, because I was basically the only one driving a car, where I didn't have to consider buying a house instead. In my BMW 320i, I appeared almost like a grain of dust between all those Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and what else. Although they attracted my view like nothing else, I reminded myself of the fact that I was not here for watching cars and daydreaming about any physical desires. Instead, I rather focused on the desire I had already slaked, which instantly put all those ever so impressive sights in the shadows. I smiled one last time before the traffic lights turned green, and I saw the McLaren in front of me accelerating away. When I arrived at the official beginning of Wagner Ave, it was already gone, albeit I could distinctly hear it between all those V8s roaring against each other. What represented the whole pride of that supercar admirers was in my case replaced by a person named Chloe. She was my Ferrari, so to say, the matter driving me crazy when I even stared at it. Like the roar of the exhaust created elation for the one being infatuated with cars, so did the voice of Chloe generate utter harmony and satisfaction for me. Since I was only here because of her after all, I continued orientating towards the signs of the houses. Admittedly, I had to drive a while until I was in reach of the 3-digit numbers. The circumstance that one house revealed proportions equal with 3 times the house of my parents elongated the way exceptionally. But finally, after following that street for miles straight, I reached the 200 mark. In the meantime, the houses and every peripheral glamour alongside them had become mundane, so that I was able to focus solely on the number increasing further. With one exception though. With every change of tense, as regards the numbers depicted on the houses, they started getting even more incredible. Sometimes I asked myself whether I should still name them house or rather palace. At the latest, when I looked into the distance, where the numbers 300 plus were located, I chose second, as they prompted me to assume that I have reached the mansion of the president, which would imply 20 different presidents governing the city. Anyway, before I arrived at such residence, I had to stop when I beheld the digit 225, indicating that I was practically there. I orientated myself toward the opposite side of the street, as well as the consecutive house, and that was when I ultimately found my destination, at least theoretically, as I was still fascinated by the complex, which reminded me of the school building I visited ever so often. Subsequently, I parked my car close to the pedestrian way and gazed further at the building. Although it clearly had number 227 imprinted, I hesitated to approach it. Somehow, I felt uncomfortable solely at the thought to just ring the bell like I usually did when I visited someone. The Chloe I knew didn't match at all with the stereotype of people living inside such homes. And yet, I would find her inside that very building. But seen from a different perspective. When I had known her societal status before, I likely would have taken a distant seat from her, as I was programmed to do that and didn't know better. And that very program was executed again when I gazed at the building, only with the distinction that I became aware of what's going on this time. The program presupposes that you define people through money, which results lastly in the conclusion: when people have much money, they are to be detested. When they have no money, they're criminal. So the two main ingredients are clearly passivity of the poor and the activity of the rich, which lead among other programs to those drawers people are put in. However, as I was getting aware that I was running on autopilot, I shook myself up, because throughout recent times, I learned how to handle it better. I learned that assimilating others' opinions without questioning does more damage than good. Chloe was the exceptional person indirectly showing me that, and furthermore, how to easily resolve that, namely, by choosing differently. To say that I only evaluate people based on my experience with them, and not judging them based on any possessions, preconceptions, religions, skin tones, and so on. They may be rich, but they are also humans, just like me. So what was I afraid of? I was not at all a persona non grata, as I received an invitation beforehand. And for I was already more than punctual, I jumped out of the car, locked it, and approached the entrance. I went up the swung stairs and stood in front of it, as I concluded by the doorbell protruding out of the wall. When I investigated further, I saw the sign summarizing the residents inside, saying Michael, Marilyn, and Chloe Baker. Measured by the third name, there was no doubt that I was correct. I was not familiar with the first two, as I never had excessive contact. In fact, the only thing we shared were gazes, and as regards her dad, only a couple of words. But disregarding that, I finally engaged with the doorbell. I listened to the lovely melody consisting of real bell sounds and therefore doing justice to the expression doorbell. Usually, there was only a small humming or ringing, which resembled more a phone alarm. However, at some point I overlooked any incoming sounds, as the constriction caused by the footsteps inside intensified. As a result, I even placed myself in one corner on the opposite side of the door to avoid a direct confrontation. I first wanted to gain a peek at who it was, to consider further steps. But before I could realize any further safety regulations, the door already opened, and unfortunately the person I was least acquainted with was standing face to face with me. Should I take a bow? Should I call her by her name, or better Miss? Wait, what was the difference between Miss and Mrs.? After frantic attempts to compose an initiation, I ushered in something like an improvisation. Hello, I am Aaron. You could know me from the hospital, Anyway, is Chloe at home? Not being very impressed by my performance, she replied briefly. Welcome, come in, Aaron. I trudged behind her while holding my hands tight on my back. She walked further and led me to the main area, the the dining room, where an immense table granted space for dozens of people. I complied with her by taking a seat and waiting for her to call upon the others, what she intended to do next. I looked around and saw all kinds of decorations, as well as doors leading to further highly impressive rooms, in case they were standing open. I was like a dog exploring a new vicinity, as I laid my focus on literally everything, even on the ever so secondary cufflinks adorning the chairs. But all in all, it prevented me from lapsing into thoughts, which has not happened once since I arrived. And I was still far away from doing so, as I suddenly heard a noise behind me, which instantly transformed the as yet foreign location into a second home. Aaron, finally. I jumped up from my seat when I saw her standing in the wide open door. From then on, any unpleasant feeling vanished, and nothing could hold me distant from her, so that I ran into her direction with spread arms. From third perspective, it probably looked like the final scene in a happily ending movie, when the two protagonists encounter each other again. Just like those fictitious characters would run into their counterparts' direction, we did, as Chloe likewise rushed toward me.